Do you think that now they've linked? Uh, I guess in the UK it's only been the last 3 or 4 years again, but maybe well in America definitely it's been a bit longer. But now they've linked the woke to race. Um, how do we move forward from here without being divided? I mean, I just don't know how we like when you have. I'll give you a quick example, and I know that this is hits closer to home to you than some other people. Um, but like for example, my son was at school. His school is like an average sort of country-ish school. And when the maybe not so much now, but for about a year, they the some of the black kids in his school, and they did not want this, I should say. These white kids would go out at lunchtime and get on their knees, and they would be like, "We need to apologize to Jaden. Get on your knees. You need to apologize." And he'd be like, "For what?" Because your ancestors did bad things to his ancestors. Said that these kids did not want this, but it was just something that these weird white kids were kind of leading against. But I don't know how we can set, because I feel like in the late 90s and the 2000s everything was really good. I mean, mostly really good. No one gave a crap either way. And now it's kind of forced the issue into where everybody's like walking on eggshells, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to offend you. I don't want to offend you." But we have to get on because nobody's going anywhere, nor should they. So what do we do? I just can't. This is probably the biggest issue I'm worried about, because I think in America it looks like they're just becoming two different tribes. The people of color, if you want to say that. Although I think that the Latino people have been way more oppressive than the white people in the Americas, 10 times the slaves. And the whites. And obviously, you have a small spillover. So most of the people that aren't in the Democrat Party, I think it's about 20% of them are not white. And then in the Democrat Party, you obviously got your portion of white people. So it's never going to be complete one side and the other. But this is definitely an issue that's coming, isn't it? Like, is this avoidable?
I'm not sure if it's avoidable because human beings are tribal. People will tend to associate with people like them and will value their own traditions. And ironically, there are few places where that is clearer than Africa. If you
Yeah,
go around to different parts of Africa and think about the tensions between them,
I
a lot
know.
of those tensions are tribal. They're all black, like the skin color isn't the main point. It's about
Mm.
group identity. And you're right that woke has been linked to race. But people need to understand that isn't necessarily because the woke activists are really interested in race or passionate
No,
about it. It's just because it is a sore point to poke society in and agitate. So if you can drum up enough aggression, enough irritation around that particular sore point, then you might produce enough civil unrest to get the revolution going. And this is really what critical theory is. A lot of people spend time trying to figure out what really is critical theory. What's the set of propositions that it lays out? The
mm.
clue's in the name. It just is to criticize. The whole social order is corrupt and needs to be subverted and brought down. And there's no real substantive vision of what they're going to replace it with. The closest I've seen it being articulated as is Marcuse, who just said it's all about pleasure. The new society is based around pleasure.
Mm.
So if people see the world in terms of conflict and simplified groups, whether it's men versus women or blacks versus whites, then you are falling into the exact trap that they are setting for you. And it
Mm.
would be much more sensible to study history and see things from a more sophisticated, higher perspective. Let's take slavery, for example. It's
Mm.
universal and it existed long before the transatlantic slave trade. It
Yeah.
also happened to a far greater extent within Africa. The Muslims enslaved more Africans than the Americans did. 3/4 of the African slaves for the transatlantic slave trade were provided by the Africans themselves. So these
Oh
things are
wow.
complex. Yeah,
Mm.
these things are complex. When the British delegates went to try and stop the slave trade, the African powers said, no, sorry, look, we don't want to stop. It's too profitable. So it's complex, and you can't just give people this very straightforward, simplistic view of it and then expect to politically activate or agitate them with it.
Yeah.
People need to have an informed understanding, and this is why history has been one of the subjects that's so tightly controlled.
Yeah, dude, like almost every day now, I don't know, for the last 2 or 3 years, and maybe it was me being too busy or just too ignorant, but I literally every day now I think of what things in history are not as they seem, because you can see how easily I know it's slightly different now because we have such a powerful media that's just it has its tentacles everywhere, and obviously a lot more people. Maybe that makes it less powerful. I don't know, but I see how quickly they can change the narrative on things, and yeah, it makes me look back and think. I wonder how many things didn't happen or happened slightly different, or you had a general that was a bit of a knob, but he wanted to have a really nice piece of history written about him, so he claimed to fight a bear before he fought 17 men, and we celebrate that today. Like, yeah, that dude killed 17 men and a bear. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I just look at history in a much different light in the last few years than I did before.
Yeah, that's very wise to do that, and ultimately people's education is their own responsibility, not the government's, and parents are the primary educators of children. So a lot of this has happened because parents have complacently offloaded the education of children onto the state, assuming that everything is going to be fine. But it's turned out that no, it's really not. And if you spend more time talking to your kids about exactly what they're being taught, how they're being taught it, you get more and more concerned. I know people who've told me, people with first-hand experience through their families of the Russian Revolution, that they are terrified of the way that topic is taught to kids in secondary schools. They said they can go through the textbooks and they can see what's being left out, and it's just lies. And one of the clearest examples is the stress placed on the teaching of Nazi Germany and the idea that Hitler is a right-wing monster when he was a socialist. Hitler is left-wing. He's to the right of Marx, but he's still left-wing, hence the name, National Socialist. Yep, it's obvious. But most kids will say, oh yeah, Hitler's right-wing, just because he's to the right of Marx. Meanwhile, the history of communism is something that not many students know much about. That one's been kept fairly low-key. And that's a clue that people need to look into it more. If you haven't been directed to a topic, it's because it's one they don't want you to look at.
That's an interesting, you should make that your slogan. So of all the sort of, did you have the teachers' unions involved at some point? And how have they been with you?
No, I wasn't a member of a teachers' union. I don't like any of them. I don't trust them.
Why
so
not?
In general, they seem to be largely left-wing organizations. So that I was suspicious about them, and the level of legal depth that my case went into anyway, it went beyond what a teachers union would have helped with.
Okay, I'm with you. Obviously, when this happened, did you receive threats, or because you were such a big name for a period, and I saw people from the left obviously calling you the usual hilarious names, which was ironic, and I wondered if maybe also you'd had anybody approach you to say you could be the new face of such and such, right-wing thing or conservative thing, and no?
No,
Oh,
it's
that's the trick.
I've just been largely left to get on with my life, which is nice in a way, but also I can imagine would have been really terrifying for some people. And it's why more people don't speak up, even if they agree that what's going on around them is bad. They're just terrified to get off the teat of these institutions. They just want to stay there suckling on it, hoping that if they shut their eyes and stick their fingers in the ears, then everything's going to be okay in the end. But
Yeah.
I highly doubt that's the case.
Where did you? I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, Will, but you're slightly different to the normal person. You know, you lift ridiculous amounts of weights. You have, a pretty steeled backbone. You have 6 children, which I am massively grateful for because more people that think like you need to have 15 children. But I wondered, where has all this come from? Like, you have something about the military about you. Were you raised by someone in the military, or just raised by good people? Or talk to me.
No, I've got. If you go back into my family on both sides, you've got people who were military, but that's not unusual for that time. Most
Hmm.
people's families have got that. I just think it's that I was genuinely passionate about education and about ideas and the importance of free speech. And this is an unusual time. We have really come to a crunch point, and there are lines you can cross that you can't go back over. And
Hmm.
if a point of no return is going to be there in education, I think teachers cancelling lectures, making it so that students can't hear ideas, is one. And
Hmm.
not only that, they're not even allowed to listen to the lecture in their own homes, in their free time on YouTube either. So, what are they going to do next? Go around their houses and confiscate books from their bedrooms?
Winston stopped writing, partly because he was suffering from cramp. He did not know what had made him pour out this stream of rubbish